10 years ago or longer, we never would have anticipated this moment where Marty and I get to go down together underground in the money pit.
That moment on Oak Island may finally have arrived, the moment treasure hunters, historians, and millions of viewers have been waiting for more than 220 years. The latest discovery has challenged decades of assumptions and raised one astonishing possibility. Could the legendary treasure really be closer than ever to being uncovered? For over a decade, Rick and Marty Lagina and their team have poured more than $100 million into this extraordinary search. They've drilled hundreds of boreholes, excavated thousands of feet underground, and used advanced technologies including muon scanning, seismic mapping, and deep core drilling in an attempt to uncover what lies beneath the island. Now, the newest findings have revealed something investigators simply can't ignore. Deep below the surface, unusual resistance patterns, artificial-looking material recovered from core samples, and a confined underground zone have reignited speculation that a massive man-made structure could exist where the legendary treasure has long been believed to rest. Some estimates have even suggested that, if such a cache exists and remains intact, its value could reach hundreds of millions of dollars. But is this finally the breakthrough that will solve Oak Island's greatest mystery? Or is the island about to deceive another generation of treasure hunters? Before we uncover the evidence, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because what you're about to see could be one of the most fascinating chapters ever uncovered in the 220-year history of the Oak Island mystery. Oak Island isn't just another legend made for Hollywood. It's a real mystery that has fascinated explorers, historians, and treasure hunters for more than 2 centuries. Everything began in 1795, when 3 young boys stumbled upon a strange depression in the ground on a small island in Nova Scotia. That location would eventually become famous as the Money Pit. At first, the boys were simply curious, but the deeper they dug, the stranger everything became. Every few feet they uncovered carefully placed wooden platforms, unusual layers, and signs that suggested someone had deliberately built something underground. It quickly became clear that this wasn't an ordinary hole in the ground. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to create it. As news of the discovery spread, one expedition after another arrived, each convinced they would be the one to solve the mystery. Over the next 2 centuries, countless excavations took place, enormous amounts of money were invested, and millions of dollars disappeared into the search. Yet, despite all those efforts, the legendary treasure remained out of reach. The island seemed determined to protect its secrets. Flooded shafts repeatedly swallowed excavation sites, expensive equipment was destroyed, and several searchers tragically lost their lives. Those events gave rise to what many now call the Curse of Oak Island. Even so, the mystery refused to fade. Every few years, another intriguing discovery would reignite hope. Ancient coins, old timber, mysterious artifacts, and unexplained structures continued to fuel speculation that something valuable might still be hidden deep below the surface. That is what makes Oak Island so different from any ordinary treasure hunt. For many people, it has become far more than the search for gold. It represents an obsession that has consumed generations, demanding extraordinary sacrifices of time, money, and determination. Now, as the latest chapter of the investigation unfolds, many believe the search has reached one of its most important moments yet. After more than 220 years of unanswered questions, there is renewed hope that the mystery which began in 1795 may finally reveal its greatest secret. Among everyone who has searched this island, few have committed themselves like Rick and Marty Lagina. What began as a childhood fascination for Rick eventually became a lifelong mission. Marty, using his engineering background and business experience, transformed that dream into a full-scale scientific operation. During the past decade, the brothers have invested more than $100 million into the project. That's an extraordinary commitment for a mystery that still has no definitive answer. Advanced drilling programs, sophisticated flood control systems, heavy excavation equipment, and cutting-edge surveying methods have all been brought to the island in pursuit of a single goal: discovering whether a legendary treasure truly exists beneath the ground. Every new season has brought greater risks and even greater challenges. Massive machines, complex drilling operations, and expensive engineering projects have pushed the search further than ever before. More than once, it seemed as though the entire operation might come to an end. But quitting was never an option. For Rick, this journey is the fulfillment of a dream he has carried since he was a young boy. Walking away now would mean abandoning a passion that has defined much of his life. Marty approaches every discovery with logic, evidence, and careful analysis. Yet even he recognizes that the project has become much larger than a financial investment. Today, Oak Island has grown into a worldwide phenomenon. Millions of viewers follow every breakthrough, every setback, and every new clue, hoping that each season will finally provide the answer people have been searching for over 2 centuries. The pressure has never been greater. The Lagina brothers understand that every decision could shape the future of the investigation. They are now closer than ever to either making history or adding another unforgettable chapter to one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. And, as the newest season unfolds, one thing becomes immediately clear. This search is no longer driven by shovels and excavation alone. The investigation has entered an entirely new era, where advanced technology and scientific analysis are changing the way Oak Island is explored. For generations, the search on Oak Island depended largely on old legends, historical sketches, and educated guesses. Every excavation was based on theories that could never be fully verified. But this season, everything changed. Instead of relying on speculation, the team turned to some of the most advanced technology ever used on the island, making this investigation unlike any that came before. One of the biggest breakthroughs came from muon scanning, a technique already known for helping researchers detect hidden spaces inside ancient pyramids. Rather than looking directly underground, the system measures tiny variations in density, allowing investigators to identify areas that could contain solid structures or unexpected empty spaces. When the results arrived, they immediately caught the team's attention. Several locations displayed unusual density patterns, suggesting the possible presence of a confined underground space that behaved differently from the surrounding Earth. The investigation didn't stop there. The team also carried out detailed seismic mapping, sending energy waves deep into the ground to measure how different underground layers responded. The data revealed that at roughly 90 to 100 feet below the surface, one particular zone reacted in a way that natural soil typically doesn't. Instead of producing a consistent geological pattern, the readings hinted at the possibility of something far more organized beneath the ground. Another major turning point came when artificial intelligence was brought into the investigation. Years of drilling logs, geological surveys, scan results, and historical records were combined into a single dataset. While individual reports had revealed only isolated clues, AI was able to compare thousands of data points simultaneously, highlighting relationships that would have been almost impossible to detect manually. As multiple independent datasets began pointing toward the same location, the team finally identified a target worthy of focused investigation. That discovery led directly to another phase of deep core drilling. Boreholes extending beyond 100 feet were drilled with every recovered sample carefully documented and examined. Soil composition, fragments of wood, stone layers, and other materials were analyzed one by one. As more samples were collected, the evidence appeared increasingly unusual, strengthening the belief that this area deserved much closer examination. The search had entered a completely different stage. Instead of chasing legends, each new decision was now guided by measurements, engineering, and scientific analysis. For perhaps the first time in Oak Island's long history, technology, not luck, seemed to be leading the investigation. One of the season's most dramatic moments arrived when instruments began detecting unexpected conditions deep beneath the surface. As drilling approached approximately 90 to 100 feet, operators noticed a sudden change in resistance. The drill no longer behaved as expected. Rather than passing smoothly through uniform soil, it repeatedly encountered sections that felt unusually solid before unexpectedly breaking into softer material. Initially, the team considered the possibility of an ordinary rock formation. However, once engineers reviewed the data, the pattern appeared far less typical. Natural geological layers usually produce relatively consistent readings, but these results showed abrupt changes in both density and resistance that stood out from the surrounding ground. Independent data collected through seismic surveys and muon scanning appeared to highlight the same underground zone, adding further interest to the location. According to drilling reports, there were moments when the equipment required the same force normally needed to cut through extremely hard material. Yet, only inches later, resistance dropped dramatically, allowing the drill to move through much softer ground. Such alternating conditions raised an intriguing possibility. Similar patterns can sometimes be associated with layered underground features where dense material exists alongside empty or less compact spaces. What made the findings even more interesting was that multiple drill holes showed similar behavior at nearly the same depth. Instead of looking like an isolated irregularity, the repeated pattern suggested there might be a larger underground feature extending across the area. One investigator remarked that the readings did not resemble a typical natural formation and deserved much closer examination. At that point, the atmosphere on the island changed noticeably. Earlier expeditions often relied on hope and instinct, but now every new measurement seemed to add another piece to a much larger puzzle. Whether these signals ultimately point to a man-made structure or an unusual geological formation remains uncertain, but they have undoubtedly become one of the most compelling clues uncovered during the investigation. The excitement reached another level once deep core samples finally began returning from the target depth. Ordinarily, samples taken from nearly 100 feet underground are expected to contain familiar layers of soil, gravel, and natural bedrock, but several recovered cores appeared different enough to attract immediate attention. Among the recovered material were compact pieces of wood, unlike loose roots or recently buried organic matter. The fragments appeared tightly compressed after spending a long time underground, leading investigators to wonder whether they might once have formed part of an older buried structure rather than occurring naturally. The deeper the drilling went, the more unusual the recovered material became. Investigators weren't simply finding ordinary underground soil anymore. Some of the wooden fragments appeared tightly compressed, almost as though they had once been intentionally placed beneath the surface rather than occurring naturally. As additional core samples arrived, the discoveries became even more intriguing. Among the material were stones with remarkably clean edges and regular shapes. Instead of looking like naturally fractured rock, they appeared to have been cut or shaped before ending up underground. What drew even more attention, however, was the sequence of layers inside the cores. Instead of a continuous stretch of soil, the samples repeatedly showed alternating materials, soil followed by compact layers, then wood, then stone, before returning to soil again. That repeating pattern immediately reminded researchers of historical excavation accounts describing wooden platforms encountered at regular intervals beneath the money pit. Some recovered wood even displayed discoloration that investigators associated with exposure to intense heat or burning at some point in the distant past. While the exact cause remains uncertain, the marks added another unexpected detail to an already unusual collection of evidence. When every sample was compared side by side, a broader picture began to emerge. Rather than appearing completely random, the materials seemed to fit together in a way that suggested an organized underground system instead of ordinary geological deposits. For the first time, the team wasn't relying only on electronic scans or computer models. They now had physical material recovered directly from beneath the island, evidence that encouraged further investigation into whether something significant had once been constructed there. As the drilling results were combined with the geophysical data, attention increasingly shifted toward one long-discussed possibility: the hidden chamber theory. For years, different clues had appeared independently, but none of them had formed a complete picture. This time, however, multiple sources of evidence seemed to converge on the same location. Seismic surveys, muon imaging, and drilling records all pointed toward a confined underground zone that behaved differently from the surrounding ground. Instead of looking like a random geological irregularity, the data suggested a distinct area worthy of much closer examination. Even more interesting was how these findings appeared to echo descriptions recorded by early searchers. Excavation journals from the early 19th century repeatedly mentioned wooden platforms discovered at regular intervals beneath the surface. Seeing similar layering in modern core samples naturally renewed interest in those historical accounts. Researchers began assembling a possible model based on all the available information. One possibility was that the underground feature could involve a chamber or interconnected passageways protected by multiple layers above, making direct access extremely difficult. If such a structure exists, it would suggest careful planning rather than a simple hiding place. At one point, Rick Lagina reflected on the possibility, saying that if the interpretation was correct, the team might finally be standing directly above the feature they had been searching for. Yet, that possibility raises an even bigger question. Could this really be the legendary chamber that generations of treasure hunters have searched for? Or are these simply more clues that continue to deepen one of history's greatest mysteries? Whatever the answer, one fact stands out. Pieces of evidence that once seemed unrelated are now beginning to overlap. Different technologies, different drilling locations, and different historical records all appear to point toward the same area beneath Oak Island. For decades, the investigation has been driven by stories and scattered clues. But now, another topic has entered the discussion: the potential value of whatever may be hidden underground. Some estimates have suggested that, if a substantial cache exists and remains intact, its contents could be worth anywhere between $300 million and $380 million in today's market. These figures remain speculative, but they are based on historical theories, the apparent size of the underground target, and assumptions about what such a chamber might contain. The speculation extends beyond gold alone. Researchers have long wondered whether any hidden deposit could also include silver, historic coins, religious objects, manuscripts, or other rare artifacts dating back centuries. If multiple deposits exist rather than a single cache, the historical significance could be just as remarkable as any financial value. Using available scan data and the estimated dimensions of the underground anomaly, some analysts have attempted to model how much material such a chamber might theoretically contain. Under certain assumptions, those calculations suggest the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of ounces of precious metals could fit within the available space. Even a conservative estimate based solely on gold would produce an extraordinary figure. For example, if a chamber contained approximately 150,000 ounces of gold, and gold were valued at around $2,000 per ounce, the total would exceed $300 million before accounting for any additional artifacts or historical objects. Of course, these calculations remain hypothetical until the underground feature is directly explored, but if the estimates prove even partially accurate, the discovery would represent one of the most extraordinary archaeological and treasure hunting finds ever associated with Oak Island. If any rare artifacts, historic objects, or precious metals are ultimately recovered, some estimates suggest the total value could rise well beyond $300 million, with certain projections reaching as high as $350 million to $380 million. At that point, this would no longer be remembered as an ordinary treasure hunt. It would become one of the most valuable discoveries ever associated with Oak Island. Some researchers even argue that these estimates may be cautious. If the underground feature contains multiple chambers or several hidden deposits instead of a single cache, the potential value could be significantly greater. But with larger expectations comes greater uncertainty. If the theory proves correct, history could remember this as one of the greatest treasure discoveries ever made. If it doesn't, it may become another chapter in the long list of Oak Island mysteries that appeared convincing, but ultimately remained unsolved. As discussions about the possible value intensified, the atmosphere surrounding the project changed dramatically. For the team, these figures represented much more than money. They reflected years of determination, enormous financial commitment, and the hope that countless setbacks had not been in vain. For Rick Lagina, the moment carried deep personal meaning. To him, the latest findings represented more than scientific data. They brought him closer to the dream that had inspired him since childhood. Reflecting on the recent discoveries, Rick expressed the belief that if the evidence continued to hold up, the team might finally accomplish something that had eluded every expedition for more than 2 centuries. Marty Lagina, however, approached the situation from a very different perspective. Despite the growing excitement, he remained focused on evidence rather than expectations. Marty repeatedly emphasized that no conclusion should be accepted until it could be fully verified, reminding everyone that Oak Island has produced promising clues in the past that later failed to deliver definitive answers. That balance has become one of the team's greatest strengths. Rick's passion keeps the search moving forward, while Marty's analytical mindset prevents excitement from outrunning the evidence. Together, those contrasting viewpoints have shaped every major decision throughout the investigation. Outside the island, opinions remain just as divided. Some specialists believe the combination of drilling results, underground scans, and historical records forms the strongest body of evidence seen in decades. Others urge caution, pointing out that Oak Island's complicated geology can sometimes produce formations that resemble artificial structures even when they are entirely natural. As a result, the same evidence has led to completely different interpretations. To some observers, it appears the team is closing in on a remarkable discovery. To others, the latest findings may simply represent another false lead in a mystery that has repeatedly challenged expectations. That uncertainty has always defined Oak Island. Every promising clue is accompanied by an equally compelling reason to remain skeptical. Yet, while the possibility of discovery grows, another challenge becomes impossible to ignore. The closer the team moves toward the suspected target, the greater the engineering risks become. Excavating Oak Island has never been straightforward. Throughout its long history, attempts to reach deeper levels have often been interrupted by flooding, unstable ground, and sudden collapses. These hazards are one of the reasons the Money Pit earned its legendary reputation. This season, those dangers are especially significant because the investigation is focused on the same depth, roughly 90 to 100 feet below the surface, where several datasets have identified an unusual underground anomaly. At those depths, the surrounding ground can become highly unstable. Layers of soil, fractured rock, and older excavated areas create conditions where even a carefully planned operation must proceed with extreme caution. Any unexpected movement could damage both the excavation and the evidence researchers hope to preserve. One of the greatest concerns involves water. For generations, searchers have believed that underground flood tunnels may exist somewhere beneath the island. Whether those tunnels are natural, engineered, or a combination of both remains debated. But if an underground passage were suddenly opened, water could rapidly enter the excavation area and complicate the operation. Engineers therefore treat every stage of drilling with exceptional care. Every borehole, every adjustment, and every decision is carefully modeled before work continues. At this stage of the search, even a minor error in positioning or drilling could jeopardize months of work and potentially destroy valuable evidence before it can be properly examined. The investigation has now entered its most delicate phase. Excitement among the team has never been higher, but neither has the pressure. Everyone involved understands that Oak Island has challenged generations of explorers, and if history has taught them anything, it is that the island rarely gives up its secrets without a fight. The investigation has now reached a stage where there is almost no turning back. After years of collecting evidence, the latest scans, drilling records, and core samples all appear to be directing the team toward the same underground location. That is why the next phase is considered the most critical and potentially the most dangerous operation of the entire expedition. This is no ordinary excavation. Every decision must be precise because even a small mistake could damage the site, destroy valuable evidence, or cost millions of dollars. Rather than digging blindly, the team is following a carefully engineered plan designed to reduce as much risk as possible. One of the key elements of that strategy is the use of heavy steel casing. As drilling progresses deeper underground, large steel cylinders are installed to reinforce the surrounding walls. At depths approaching 100 feet, the combination of loose soil, fractured rock, and older underground voids can become extremely unstable. Without continuous support, sections of the excavation could collapse before investigators have a chance to examine what lies below. Although this method takes considerably more time, engineers consider it the safest way to continue. The excavation itself is also being carried out in a highly controlled manner. Instead of removing material as quickly as possible, every layer is documented, scanned, and analyzed before work moves forward. If sensors detect unexpected ground movement, abnormal pressure, water intrusion, or unusual resistance, operations are immediately paused so the situation can be reassessed. At this stage, speed means nothing. Accuracy is everything. Perhaps the most anticipated part of the entire operation is the deployment of a specialized waterproof camera system. For the first time, the team hopes to lower a remotely operated camera into the depth where the underground anomaly has been identified. If conditions allow, the camera could provide the first direct visual looks inside the suspected confined space without immediately disturbing it. Every answer uncovers a new mystery.